Well, today on the Wealth Transfer Podcast, we have Jonathan Meaney, Senior Vice President and Wealth Manager at Carter Financial. And Jonathan is a CFP. He's an accredited investment fiduciary, and he's been doing this for 25 years, advising wealthy families on how to plan their wealth and where to put it, how to invest it, and then also how to transfer it. So today, I'm excited to ask Jonathan some questions about some of the different planning strategies he's using and also what financial planners do. Because I think a lot of times, if we're outside the industry, we may not necessarily know some of the things that they do. So Jonathan, tell us about, you've been doing this 25 years. Tell us your background, how the years have progressed, and what you do on a daily basis.
Sure. Well, and first, thanks, Matt, for having me on today. So I started at Southwest Securities right out of college, and it was January of 2001. The market was crashing. I had intended to get into a trading job, maybe making markets on the trading desk there at Southwest, but the markets were not in a good spot, and so they were not hiring in that area. I decided to get into the customer accounts department. I wanted my foot in the door. I wanted to start getting my licenses and making my way towards, an eventual future. And so my role at that time was to send out margin calls for clients who had bought on margin, which is basically they used leverage to buy $2 worth of stock with only $1. It works great when the market's going up, but when the market's going down, you can actually lose not only the dollar that you put in, but you may have to deposit more. And so my job was to send out calls for more capital. And I thought it was just horrible. I didn't know how people could be an advisor providing advice to people who could get themselves into that kind of a pickle. So I really wasn't too pleased. But what I soon realized is that they had quite a few offices, one in particular that, number one, they weren't overloaded on tech. Number two, they weren't on margin, and they were not losing their shirts. And so I decided if I was going to stay in the industry, I would want to be affiliated with a group like that. And so I kept my eyes on, job postings, and what do you know, a spot came up to become a sales assistant, which was much better than the customer accounts department because at least it got me onto that side of the business. And I was, fortunately for me, teamed up with a gentleman who was a CPA that had been in investing, and he did financial planning. And so that was my first taste of, what a financial planner does. He was the only guy in the office that did it. When I told my branch manager there at the time that I wanted to get my CFP designation, that I could focus on planning too, he kind of laughed and said that I was wasting my time and I needed to just pick up the hot stock list and smile and dial. But I didn't do that. I did get the CFP designation over time and decided that it was going to be time to move to a shop that was more focused on planning. And that is how I ended up here at Carter Financial, where I've been for almost 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, and a lot of times I think we hear all the different designations or the different job titles people have, and it may be hard to know, like, what does this person do? Like, what's the value they provide to the industry or to a client? So what does a financial planner do? What's the real value that a financial planner can bring to a client?
Sure. Well, a lot of people today call themselves financial planners and they don't do planning. Anyone can call themselves a financial planner. It's not a protected term. You could be an insurance agent. You could be a stock jockey that really doesn't do any planning, but it's an attractive term in today's markets. But what it really should be is someone who looks not just at your portfolio and compares it to the S&P 500 and tries to beat the market. It should be someone who wants to understand what your goals are, what you have outside of the investment account that they're looking at. So all of your assets, all of your liabilities, where you are from a risk management standpoint, what your goals are, how much money you're spending. If you've done an estate plan, is it appropriate for you still? Does it need to be updated? All these various pieces that are your overall financial picture have to be looked at before we can really tell you how we should invest your portfolio and what we should recommend for your portfolio. We've got a lot of clients that have more than enough. They're pretty conservative spenders, and their objective should not be to try to beat the market. In fact, there's too much risk in attempting to do so. What they really need to do is grow at a moderate pace, sometimes in a conservative balanced portfolio, because they've already amassed enough, not only to take care of themselves, but also to leave behind a legacy for their kids. On the other hand, there are others that are younger or maybe in a different life situation, can afford to take more risk. But financial planning is the ability to look at all of those pieces and to create what amounts to a living document that we review every year. We talk about goals, what those goals are. We may realize over time that you can afford to add a few more goals because you've got enough money. You may be able to gift money to your charitable interests during your lifetime and get to enjoy doing that during your lifetime as opposed to leaving that as a gift after death. Or maybe you can afford to put grandkids through college. There's so many things that we help our clients prepare for. Maybe it's a vacation home or just to travel more. But I think of planning as a lens through which you can make financial decisions. If something happens and you need to move, how much house can you afford? And how much would it impact your plan to make certain decisions, either positively or negatively? So it's, that's financial planning for us. We've been doing it at this firm it'll be 50 years next year. And it's kind of our DNA.
Now, I think oftentimes people might confuse financial plan with investment management or with tax planning. Do you make the plan once and then you just go execute on the plan from an investment strategy or from a tax strategy? What does it look like once you've met with a client? What happens next?
Sure. Well, the financial plan itself takes some time. It takes some time to pull together the data. It takes some time for us to have conversations and get to know what the goals are. Sometimes people come in with the goals prepared. Other times we help people refine what their goals could be. It's a way of thinking about what's possible and whether or not you can achieve it or not. But the initial plan, if you think of it like, two axes and you put the first dot with the initial plan. It's only after you've reviewed it periodically, annually, quarterly, every time you have a meeting that you actually can track your progress, see if you're on track or not. So it's definitely an ongoing process.
Now, obviously we work in real estate. We do some real estate planning as well, helping people decide, should you sell this? Should you keep this? Should you 1031 exchange it? Should you transfer what are the tax consequences of the real estate? In your financial planning, do you end up working through the whole set of assets or the whole life situation, even if it's not stuff that's maybe in the stock market? Like, do you talk to people about businesses and their real estate and that sort of thing as well?
Absolutely. We're not in the real estate business, but we look at all assets. We want to know what basis is, what's the intent for that real estate. If it's income producing real estate, how does that fit into to all income, whether it's earned income, passive income. We want to know about all of those things. And when someone has a question that's very specifically real estate related, whether it be to do a 1031 or to sell or whatever it may be, as with all of the other professionals that we work with, we bring in someone who's an expert in those areas. We don't create trusts or wills. We review them. We want them to be appropriate. And if they're not, we might provide some feedback to bring to their advisor. We may meet with them and their attorney if they want us to do that. The same thing with the real estate situation. We would want to bring in an expert in the field. If it's an area that's really, really growing, does it make more sense to wait? Does it make more sense to do it now? And we want to be involved in all those conversations. We kind of want to be the quarterback, really, because we're the one that in that plan, everything is brought together so that you can see how everything is working together and what the change in one area does to the overall plan itself.
What are some of the biggest mistakes people make, whether it's in financial planning or their investment strategy, whether you're talking to a client or maybe someone that just came to you? What are you seeing as some of the big mistakes people are making these days?
Well, there are some common mistakes. I would say one, and these are going to go across different areas, but naming minors as beneficiaries, whether it be insurance policies or IRAs, that's a big no-no. Kids that are named as beneficiaries of insurance policies, basically someone's going to hold it for them until they turn 18, and then at 18, they're going to get the whole thing. And next thing you know, they're driving a new truck, they've got a boat behind it, and the money just doesn't last long. So you need to have preparations in your estate documents. Your will may create trusts with trustees. It may name certain ages at which they get some of these dollars. This is something that an estate planning attorney would help with, and we could, of course, could provide any feedback needed in that process. Other areas, let's say they do create a trust or create an entity with the intent that this trust is going to own their assets, and they walk out of the estate planner's office and they forget to mention that to their financial advisor. And so the assets don't get retitled. So the assets are therefore not in the trust. If they intend to put their home in that trust, if they don't get it redeeded, then that asset is not in their trust. It's going to go through probate. Those are a couple. Let's see. I would say that not optimizing Social Security strategy. And that doesn't seem like it would be much to do with wealth transfer, but when you take Social Security too early, you're missing out on significant gains in that asset. And therefore, you're going to have to take more out of your investment accounts, which are what's otherwise going to be available to leave to your beneficiaries. So Social Security optimization is a big one. And then I would say not taking advantage of annual gifting. You can do $19,000 per kid, per grandkid, per neighbor if you want to. And if you're a married couple, that becomes $38,000. So those are meaningful dollars. And when you get them out of your estate now, the growth of those dollars can occur on the balance sheet of your beneficiaries during their lifetimes. If you want to do it in trust, that's fine. If you want to give it to them outright, that's fine. If you want to give it to a 529 plan, that's fine.
Well, and tell us more about 529, because I've looked into these as well. And I know some people, like, one of the big benefits is they don't use it for school. They can roll it into a Roth IRA. But how are wealthy individuals using 529s to transfer money out of an estate?
Well, the cool thing about 529s, there's a lot of cool things, but 529 plans are not just for college. They're also now for K through 12. They used to have a limit of $10,000 that could be used for K through 12, but that's actually now $20,000 per year that can be pulled from a 529 plan for K through 12 education. And to back up a little on 529s, so you put money into the account. You are the owner, or your spouse is the owner, and you name a beneficiary. So little Johnny is your beneficiary. So when you make a deposit into the 529 plan, this year you can do $19,000 per spouse. So if you're a married couple, it can be $38,000 into the 529 plan for little Johnny.
Per beneficiary.
That's your annual gift. That's your annual gift from each spouse to little Johnny. He's got $38,000 in a 529 plan that has him listed as a beneficiary. But little Johnny doesn't own the account. You own the account. So you've just made a gift out of your estate, but you have full control of the asset. You can change the beneficiary to someone else. You can change the beneficiary to yourself. Interestingly, also with 529 plans, you can make 5 years of accelerated gifting into that account. So that's $90,000 if you're single, or $180,000, if you are a married couple. So you can accelerate all of that. You can get that money out of your estate. It grows tax-free. If you take it out for college, it comes out tax-free. But what if you don't take it out for college? By the way, after 5 years is up, you can continue making those annual gift amounts so that these accounts can get quite large. They're out of your estate, yet you have full control. Normally in the legal world, if you want to have an asset and a trust that's out of your estate, you have to name a different trustee, an irrevocable trust. But with the 529 plan, you get to retain full control. And also, if you decide that you just want to give that asset if you no longer want to be the owner and you want to name your kid the owner of that account when he's 30, you can change the ownership of that 529 plan to your kid, and it is not a gift. You can change the name to the owner to anybody, and it's not a gift. So they're really cool. And so let's go back. If you don't use it for college, kid graduates and you want to buy him his first car. Just graduated from college, probably not making a ton of money yet. A check written to your child out of a 529 plan is taxed at his bracket. the recipient's tax bracket. Oh, and by the way, it's not all taxable because your basis, the amount that you put in before it started growing, you get a pro rata share of every distribution is return of basis. So there is tax on the gains and a 10% penalty on the gains. But once again, it's in little Johnny's bracket, not yours. And anyway, there's lots of cool things about those plans. If you live in a state that has state income tax, it does behoove you to use often, except for 4 states, it does behoove you to use your state's plan because you can often get a state income tax deduction. Not true in 4 states, one of them being California, I think Illinois. There's a few others. So definitely have your advisor check on that.
Well, and then I mentioned this at the beginning, but I think also you can, if you don't use it for college and there's so many in there and you didn't want to make the distribution, you can also roll it into their Roth IRA at the Roth IRA limits each year.
You can.
They do have
Yes,
to have income. They do,
absolutely.
there's other requirements around that, but just such a cool vehicle for letting some wealth grow tax-free for your beneficiary, for your heirs.
Yeah. And if your kids don't need it, get scholarships, don't use it, you can just hang on to it and use them for grandkids in the future.
Totally.
All the while they're deferred tax and they can continue to grow. Not to mention they don't cost anything to set up, 0. And most of them have a starting minimum of about $250.
Wow.
So they're cheap.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you can have them for multiple beneficiaries. You own them all, and you could always change the beneficiary on them if you wanted to. But one
Correct.
beneficiary at a time per account, I think, is the rule on that. So
That's right.
very cool. And the 19,000 per spouse is per beneficiary because again, the gift limits are per person. So if you have multiple grandkids you're doing it for, you could have 5
That's
accounts,
right.
and I mean, you could really max out all your gifting if you wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, you think about a very wealthy family who has, 4 kids, well, 2 kids and 2 spouses, and each of them has 2 or 3 or 4 kids. You can run the numbers. You can get quite a bit of money out of your estate, but you still own it.
Well, and one of the mistakes I see is, people start thinking about this once they already have too many assets, right? It's like you almost need to start a little bit earlier so you can start pulling things out before, so it can grow tax-free, separate from your estate
That's right.
or grow, or maybe not even tax-free. Maybe it just grows in somebody else's, in your kid's estate so that they're at a lower tax bracket or they're at a, different amount of total net worth. But yeah, I think oftentimes people miss out, and that by the time they get to the point where they start thinking about it, it's like, wow, we actually are maybe going to bump up against some of these. Maybe we bump up against estate tax, or maybe we've got some other.
Right.
Would have been easier to get these things out of our state earlier. Now, besides 529, are there any other strategies like that you're seeing wealthy individuals use that I think, or even semi-wealthy individuals that other people are missing out on, that they would be so easy to add into, or it'd be so easy to consider? Maybe they just don't even know about it.
Health savings accounts are just about one of the coolest things. If you're a business owner and let's say you're a single business owner, or you've got your LLC S corp election and you maybe make a salary, but you might get a good bit of your money 1099. You can, as a business owner or having an HSA plan, the premiums for your monthly plan, your monthly premiums for your HSA plan, you can pay out of your business account. As a business owner, if your objective in life is to get money out of your S corp account without paying tax. And so with an HSA, you can pay your premiums. You can pay if you're family, if you have a kids and family and you're on a family plan, the current maximum, it changes every year. I think it's about $8,700. It could be $8,200. I can't remember, but it's over $8,000 this year. And that money comes out of your business tax-free. And when the HSA, people think of HSAs like flex plans sometimes, where it's use it or lose it. You don't have to use it. You can cash flow your bills and just go ahead and pay for those now, and think of your HSA as if it was a medical retirement account, and let that money grow, get it invested, go buy the S&P 500 index or anything else. Do your best to not touch that money. If you have to, then you have to, but if you can't, let it defer And with interest or with maximums that are higher than IRAs right now, you get a deduction for the paying the premiums. You get a deduction for paying your annual max. And when the money comes out, it comes out tax free like a Roth. Think if we got a deduction for making a Roth contribution like we do for a pre-tax IRA, everybody would do it. But HSAs, people don't recognize the tax advantages there. And if you put in those annual amounts for 10, 15 years and let that grow in the market, you're going to get to retirement with several $100,000 in that account.
That's a great
You
strategy.
can also use it to pay long-term care premiums and other things out there. So there's a lot of reason to take advantage of HSAs, whether you're a business owner or not, but with a business owner, it's especially impactful.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like the number one goal is to have as much money tax-free as possible. So
Yeah,
how do I maximize every line of possible tax-free money? HSA is definitely one of those.
absolutely.
Now, one of the things that I often hear, I'll work with older clients, and especially when somebody's widowed, or maybe they're making decisions as a single person now. Maybe they haven't made those decisions alone in the past. There's a lot of fear around, am I going to have enough? Am I okay? And sometimes you look at their estate and you're like, you will have more than enough. You can never spend this for the rest of your life. Like you will be fine. But there's still this like nagging fear. Have you seen that? And how do you help clients that are trying to get older deal with the anxiety of financial planning and managing their money so that they don't feel like they're going to run out?
First of all, yes, we absolutely see it, and we see it all the time. The way we address it really goes back to the financial planning, because what we will do is, as part of that plan, we put in how much money they're spending right now. If they're still working, there was an old school of thought that said that once you retire, you're going to spend less money. We totally disagree with that. In fact, you're going to find a way to spend more because you're going to have more time on your hands. So one of the things that goes into every plan is spending. How does your current level of spending impact your long-term success of achieving your goals and financial independence? And so we're able to show some folks that, they're at 99%. Every scenario that we went through came out with you ending with gobs of money at the end, but we can just inflate their spending just to show them how much of an increase in spending it would take for them to even move the needle. And that's often helpful, but also setting other goals where they're able to maybe go ahead and make some gifts right now that again may not move the needle. At the end of the day, some folks are just hardwired to not want to spend a lot, and that's not a terrible thing. They're definitely folks that are likely not going to run into trouble down the road, but we want to empower people to be able to enjoy their resources now, instead of just passing it on to G2 or G3 who didn't have a hand in raising that money or building that nest egg, and often therefore go through it much more quickly. So to whatever extent we can help people make an impact today, whether it be on themselves or their causes that they care about or other things, that's definitely a focus for us.
Well, and you mentioned helping people dream a little bit, because I think sometimes too, you do worry about, am I going to have enough? And then once you get past that point, you don't realize there actually might be more than you could do anything with, or that you could just spend naturally. So you have to maybe dream a little bit. How do you cultivate that? And what are some ideas that you give people when they're like uncertain of how they're going to use that money they've now accumulated?
There's no hard and fast way. I would say that the majority of the time, we spend a good deal of time just getting to know people. What are their interests? What do they do with their time? What do they do with their talents, their treasure? What are their interests? They close their eyes and dream about, the perfect vacation or perfect afternoon. What would it be, and who would be there? And if we can, use that to determine or to devise some things that they could use their money for that would create such an experience, or at least the feel of it, then that would be one way we do it, the dreaming.
Now, on the other side, and I think most of the time when someone's coming to a financial planner, or they're looking at wealth management or investment management, they've got a decent amount of resources. But on the other side, you want to help people prepare for the unexpected. And
Mm.
and some of the people maybe aren't considering some of the bigger issues. How do you balance the other side, which is let's make sure that you're not underprepared?
Sure. Well, we definitely run scenarios that give you the what ifs of a 25% market downturn, or another occurrence of the great financial crisis, on how does that impact their portfolio. We also include scenarios where one of two spouses passes away. What's the net result? We run scenarios of what happens if one of the two becomes disabled, particularly if there's a significant breadwinner of the two. So we we battle test it. We stress test it is really the correct terminology, to show what happens if those things do occur. And we do every plan. We want to be conservative. We want to assume we don't care what your health concerns are, that your parents may have lived shorter lives. We got you living to 95, because that builds in a level of conservatism. Yes, we did 10, 12, 18% last year, but probably going to model for your performance to be somewhere in the 6% range on average, because we just don't know. There's no way to predict what returns will be over the long term. So you have to build in these components to every plan that add an element of conservatism, and stress test it to make sure that we're not presuming too positively.
Would you maybe think back or share with us a story of when helping a client or doing work with a client felt really meaningful to you? Like it was like, wow, I'm so glad that I was here. I'm so glad I got to participate in this. Maybe a story or an example of when this work really meant a lot to you because of what you were able to do for the client.
Sure. Trying to think of a perfect story. I often, or it seems recently, I've had a couple new clients that came to me through deaths where their spouse passed away, and they had assets in many different places, and in the cases of the two that come to mind, there were assets at, again, many different custodians, and the spouse was the one who had kind of been handling everything. And a lot of folks, and I'll just use this as an opportunity to encourage some to not wait to introduce a professional into your life, because doing it yourself, if anything happens to that financial spouse of the two, then it really is disruptive. It's really tough to get your hands around it, and to feel confident that the decisions you're making are correct. Not to mention you're dealing with grief at the same time, and all of the things that come with that. So that's a plug. But yes, so you have to get everything organized. You have to get everything moved. Every different custodian wants papers, their own paperwork. Some of them need it to be original. Some of them need it to be notarized, and trying to get everything moved around. You've got 1099s from, however many different custodians. You've got RMDs that may need to be taken, and you aren't sure if they took them from this custodian or that. There could be real estate all over the place. There could be, it could have been put into trusts or entities, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just an individual name. Every one of those properties has to be redeeded, and it can be a lot of work.
Or the trust actually says it does own it, but then the deeds didn't actually get transferred, and then
Hey, I'll tell you another on that is sometimes people do get the asset redeeded. Now the home's in the trust, but they forget to call the insurance guy. The insurance is still in the individual names, not on trust. It has to be listed. So that can be a really big problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thinking back to not just your competition, but just your industry in general, if you're giving someone advice on selecting a financial planner or even someone to manage their wealth, what things do you tell them to watch out for? What are the red flags that people should pay attention to in either not selecting someone or in investigating or interviewing someone? What should they pay attention to?
Well, I would tell someone that they really need to work with a certified financial planner. We're trained for this stuff, and it's pretty rigorous education. an exam process. And beyond that, there's also enforcement. You know, having the CFP designation, there's a board of standards. And if you have a complaint or if you don't do your job correctly, there's actual discipline that comes as a result of it. So that's where I would start. I personally, having been really involved in the Financial Planning Association and having seen the value that organization brings to financial planners from education, from a community perspective, I would say that working with someone that you can find on your local Financial Planning Association website, there's a tool that helps you search and find people that you can filter that meet certain qualifications. But Financial Planning Association is the organization, the association for certified financial planners. And so finding someone who's taken the time to get themselves educated on financial planning and to become certified in that regard, and then who's also involved with the Financial Planning Association, I think that would be a great start. And then I would also say, you know, if you have people that you know that work with advisors, and maybe if they've been working with the same advisor for a long time, you might just ask around a little bit and then interview a couple and see who you connect with.
What are the red flags that people should watch out for?
Well, you can look up advisors on, I think it's Broker Check, and see if they've had, you know, lots of complaints, because those things, if they were settled for any kind of monetary reward, that has to be listed on their record, and those things are readily available. I would tell you that, you know, you don't want to work with someone who's fresh out of school. It'd be nice to work with a firm that's been around for a little bit and who have some experienced folks. But as far as red flags, I think that, you know, checking on their records and other things would help you identify any potentially bad actors.
If you could, okay, switching gears for a second, if you could give like one specific message to all your current clients, or even just to the world in general, what would be the message that you're like, I got to get this across to all my people? I really wish they would this is the thing they need to pay attention to right now, or that's on my mind that I want them to hear.
That's a tough one. So this would be for current clients?
We could say for current clients, yeah.
Well, on the theme of wealth transfer, I think getting started on annual gifting is something that people really overlook. It seems like it's a small number, but it adds up over time. It really does. And, you know, just like with the market, it's about time in the market, not timing the market. Just make it happen. Start getting it done. If you've got a financial plan that says that you're on track, it's probably not going to move the needle to make those kind of gifts for estates that are of any significance. And so just starting early, you know, going ahead and getting that money to your heirs, whether it be in trust, whether it be a 529 plan, whatever it is, just start making it happen. And I would say the same thing for gifting. You know, charitable giving is not important to all of our clients, but for many of them it is. And often they can afford to make those gifts today and be able to enjoy the benefit of seeing the fruits of that gifting.
Yeah, and instead of doing it posthumously, they should give now, and they would have an opportunity to enjoy their giving. That's great.
Do their financial plan, make sure that they're in a position to be able to afford it. And after that, you know, make some things happen.
I love that. Well, Jonathan, how could people connect with you if they want to interview, or whether they just want to find out some more information about how you work and what your business is? How can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Sure. So Carter Financial Management, we've got a website. It's www.carterwealth.com. And also they could reach me by phone at 214-363-4200, 214-363-4200.
Awesome.
And, you know, the website, it's got plenty of data about not only me, but also all of our folks. Get you some history of the firm, get a sense for what we're about. But I'd be happy to visit with someone with any questions.
Awesome. That's it for today's episode of the Wealth Transfer Podcast. If you found value in this conversation, would you leave us a review? That would be just So honoring to us. We'd appreciate it. And if you know somebody who might need to listen to this because they're thinking about their next chapter, will you send them a link to this podcast or this video so that they can listen more as well? For more episodes and expert insights, be sure to follow and subscribe. That means the most to us. Follow and subscribe, please, please, please. And when you're ready to take action on your own real estate plan, or if you need help with wealth transfer planning, we know a number of experts in all the different spaces. We'd love to connect you with them. You can reach out to us via direct message or comment. You can email us, matt@templeton.realestate. No .com, just templeton.realestate. And I'd be happy to connect you with an advisor. Thanks so much.